Smock.
It's Mark
Mock.
one.
Mock one.
Wakanda Forever.
Wakanda Forever. Hey guys, Isabel here. Welcome back to Reeled In. Today is another Dyad Discuss with my friend Connor. I know we've been focusing on Star Wars for a while, but today we are here to talk about Marvel, specifically Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. Wakanda Forever is Marvel's newest movie and the closing movie to Phase 4, which I find very fitting. I think it's Marvel's finest tribute movie.
I think it might actually be in the top 10 for me.
Of all-time Marvel movies.
Yeah. I know it's a little bit mixed right now, but I have seen it twice and I actually really enjoyed it. I have to assess because there's like 25 films and now a bunch of shows. Heavy spoilers, by the way.
Oh yeah, spoilers.
Yes.
But I actually find it interesting you say that because I also enjoyed this movie a lot. Again, like you said, there's 25 movies, so I really have to kind of think about where I rank it. I do think it's one of the better movies, but I actually wouldn't necessarily say that this movie focused itself as like a Marvel movie. And
I think that's why I like it.
Yeah, because I know you and I were talking briefly when we both saw it, and we had kind of said this was more of a tribute movie than it was an MCU movie.
It's a lot of things. I think I'm satisfied with, overall, like we'll get into some little nitty-gritty things, but like overall I genuinely enjoyed it. I'll probably buy it on Blu-ray. It's a good sequel, right? Granted, the direction that the MCU is going, you're down a cast member and like the biggest cast member. I do think it was a very good tribute to T'Challa as the Black Panther, and then Chadwick Boseman. And I don't mean this in a bad way. I mean this more in terms of endearment, but he haunts this film, posthumously, like haunts this film. And there are so many moments that, at least for me, like he means a lot to so many people. And he means a lot to me. There's so many moments that like really get you choked up, whether they're meant to or not. Grapples with that kind of overlaying theme of grief that we've felt pretty well throughout the entirety of Phase 4.
I know. That's all Phase 4 is, just the grief phase. That's a really good word you used, haunting, that he like haunted this movie. So I did my own personal review, and it's on the channel now. And I did kind of say that, and of course, aside from the fact that T'Challa's passing is a major motivator for Shuri's plot points and like her characterization in this movie, I do wish we got a little less dialogue about like his death. And yeah. I wish it was focused more on like those silent moments, because we got two of those in this movie. One at the beginning where it replaces the fanfare. It's literally just images of Chadwick and T'Challa, and there's no music, there's nothing, it's just silence. And then at the end, when Shuri's like remembering her brother and their life and their happy moments together, and being able to kind of let that loss go or be in a better place, we see that again. And those moments may be a lot more emotional than when they kept just kind of like verbally repeating it. So as a creative standpoint, I understand you're trying to get like a message across, with dialogue, but I feel like you could also have used a bit more silent moments to do the same thing.
I agree. I don't think it was necessarily a bad thing, and it's not my biggest gripe at all.
Yeah.
I just think it's kind of the way in which it was said, or like where it was placed, or how it was delivered. Like it's a multitude of things. It could have been toned down a little bit, but again, it didn't really pull me out of it. It didn't, have me like scoffing or rolling my eyes. It just kind of at a couple times I was like, okay, we get it. But I do get that you're trying to acknowledge that in the best intended way possible.
So another thing I also liked a lot about this movie is that I think it was very character driven. And sometimes I enjoy like the characters' storylines better than just like an overall kind of like action plot. that sometimes these MCU movies tend to have.
I think that's one thing that I think this film actually admittedly does better than the first one. Is, you know, most everybody does get a pretty decent amount of development and screen time. I wish we had a little bit more time uh with Okoye and the rest of the Dora Milaje.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely like, I get her arc. She was done, you know, it's a little bit frustrating, but you know, movies got a movie, characters
Well,
got to grow.
what did you think her arc was
Um,
that makes you kind of frustrated?
well, it's just the fact that not frustrated in the sense that like it was poorly written, more frustrated that like I want the best for this character and she's not getting the best, but it's kind of because of self-inflicted actions.
Mm-hmm.
So it sort of calls back to how her loyalty to Wakanda and to tradition
Mm-hmm.
in many ways like is kind of, you know,
Detrimental a little bit.
yeah, it's kind of a fault a little bit. Yeah.
That's interesting because I actually viewed her personal story and her character development a little bit differently. And again, when because you brought up like older traditions, and so in my review, I also said that this movie kind of talked a little bit about like old versus new, where like Queen Ramonda and the Dora Milaje, they were kind of old, and then Shuri's way of thinking was more like new, with like, you know, new technology and new ways of thinking. But in terms of Okoye, I think she's also a good example of starting from like that old traditional sense. And it's sort of like that phrase, like you can't teach an old dog new tricks. But with Okoye, it's kind of possible that can happen because she went from being, you know, the general basically, and then she got yeah, she got demoted. But I think that had to happen to her in order for her to kind of view her life a little differently. And also
Yeah.
because when she became the Midnight Angel, I don't think she would have been able to do that if she was still the general. So, you know, I think she
Hmm.
had to go through all of that to sort of
Yeah.
be where she is now.
Yeah.
Also, I'm so sorry. Like I love the costumes and everything. The design departments in this movie, I love all of them except for the Midnight Angel outfits.
I don't like the helmet, but the rest of it I really like. But yeah, the I I do want to kind of side note the costume design, just like in the first, is I just I don't have words. It's so amazing.
It is amazing.
At the same time, it's really hard when you're taking cultural inspiration, right? And you're trying to do it in the most respectful way possible, and you're doing it, you know, and you're doing the research and you're being thorough. Like it's really kind of hard to get up. You know what I mean? The costumes for all the Wakandan characters and then the Talokan, they're just so they did such an amazing job, and I can't like stress that enough.
And just to see the mix of everything, it was
Yeah.
really amazing.
On the way that like it interacts with like the setting
Mhm.
and the lighting. Like a lot of times you can have really great costume design, but it clashes with whatever your background is, or it clashes with your lighting or whatever. And I just think that the head costume designer for Black Panther and Wakanda Forever, I just think that's such an amazing job. And I think it's one of like those the little things that just makes this film.
Yeah, not even just with the costumes design. I think even just going like diving a little deep into mythology as well as like you said some of the cultural aspects. I saw this movie with a couple of my friends, and one of them, her heritage actually is Central American, and she said something I didn't quite pick up on while I was watching the movie, but she said that she appreciated having cenotes mentioned in the movie, especially when they're talking about Namor's background, but where they dive into the cenote to get the plant, the vibranium plant. That was actually, I believe, a cenote that he dove into. So, and that also, cenotes have a very rich history in Central America. So she said that she really appreciated that being in there. And that's just like one small detail that maybe someone like you and I would kind of overlook, but was really important to her. So, I'm glad that she thought the movie was really good in that aspect.
Yeah, there's a lot of people feeling really good about, being represented a little bit differently. And I personally really like how they kind of turned around what was originally like Atlanteans
Mm-hmm.
into Talokan. And it actually makes more sense to me. I think it was an interview with Vanity Fair. Ryan Coogler said that he didn't want it to feel like Atlantis. He didn't want it to feel like the DC Atlantis, or even the one from the Marvel comics, or the
Mm-hmm.
cartoon that came out in the late 90s?
I don't know.
The Lost City, whatever it was. You
Oh,
made me watch
maybe
it.
I did.
Yeah.
Oh, Atlantis. Yeah, just
Yeah.
Atlantis. Yeah.
Yeah, and he didn't want it to feel like that Atlantis, even though that
Hmm.
one arguably leans a little bit more into that, a more like Mesoamerican kind of aesthetic
Hmm.
and culture. So I think his choice to kind of turn that around, really worked for the film, and we get some amazing talent too. With Tenoch Huerta. Oh my God.
Yeah, I think actually I made a comparison that I didn't even think of Atlantis when I saw Talokan, the actual city. I thought it reminded me of a different version of Wakanda, oddly enough, which I think was actually kind of the point because there's so many parallels between the Wakandans and Namor and Talokan in this movie. And I think that was kind of the point that, these civilizations that I think the rest of the world, the rest of society doesn't necessarily expect to, build these amazing things, obviously has, with the help of their vibranium inputs.
And kind of be secluded and be able to hold on to things like tradition and culture.
Mhm.
Um, and even though, it's a little over 2.5 hours, it's close to a 3 hour movie.
Right.
But I get that a lot of that space, that quote unquote extra space, take that with a grain of salt, is for world building.
Hmm.
So, like I mentioned, I've seen it twice, and it did not feel long to me at all. In fact, I was able to just kind of pick up on different things and appreciate different things in that world building that I think is very important to Ryan Coogler
Hmm.
when he's, writing these films. I think that's one thing that these two films do a lot better than the rest of the MCU films, and feel so different. And again, I think that's why I like them the most, because they don't feel like MCU films. And I know that sounds like such a sacrilegious thing to say, but it's nice and it's refreshing.
So it's kind of nice to just kind of focus on like what's happening here and like here only
Yeah.
during like a specific piece of time. But
Yeah.
I kind of can't believe people think that there's like lost space or whatever, because honestly, so much happens in this movie and happens like back to back to back. We start off really quickly, like we kind of just jump into the action. There's like little to no build up at the very beginning. It's like,
Like I said, you start in the deep end.
yeah. And I'm
You
just
don't
like,
you don't even get to dive. You're like sedated and you wake up and you're in the deep end. You're just like, how did I get here? How did I get here? And then, it jumps immediately into the parallel with T'Challa and Chadwick. I think was actually done very, very well and very respectfully.
I think it was done respectfully while also kind of having a catharsis, because to like us, the audience, his death was very like abrupt, very like no one really saw it coming except for people closest to him. Obviously, we kind of get a little bit of closure for that. I think not only us, but I'm sure the actors as well and everyone else involved in his life. Hopefully, felt a little bit of closure with doing that.
I've seen a lot of that in like the press junkets, that this film, is a way for so many other people to kind of grieve and to struggle with kind of accepting that, because that's just how grief, is. It's very hard to accept and move on.
Mm.
Which is also why I think Shuri's arc is so important, and I think resonates, at least with me. Like I didn't find myself at all looking at her and thinking like she's totally crazy. Like I get that. I get that because a lot of people get angry when they grieve because they don't know how to, expel all of that anger and sadness.
Also, even just adds to Shuri's inner torment because she believes that she's kind of the reason why he died in the movie, because she was trying to save him, essentially, with trying to make the synthetic herb, and she failed, or she didn't complete it in time, and then he passed. And so not only is she feeling grief over her brother's passing, but also an extreme amount of guilt. And so, add that to the anger festering inside of her. I think her character, her motives are pretty accurate in the film. It was a little jarring to see because it is kind of such a contrast to how she is in the first movie. So I will admit it was a little jarring, but I never thought it was unrealistic of her.
Yeah, and the fact that she is able, over the course of the movie to evolve, for hopefully for the better. She ends up a lot better than where she started. I would say.
Did we talk about any of your gripes? I feel like we haven't talked about that.
Oh yeah, here's one. One of the biggest gripes actually is more on the reception side of it. I am so tired of hearing it's not as fun as the first. Of course it doesn't.
Not.
Of course it doesn't feel as fun as the first. I don't even have to say it. It's very emotional. He throws a lot at you, and some things that I was not expecting. There was a lot that I was not expecting that happened in this movie, and I was like, oh, I know I said I wanted this to surprise me, but not like this. Like with Shuri, I didn't expect her to kind of go off the deep end, but I also didn't expect Ramonda.
That was such a surprise. That was such
Oh
a
my
shock.
God.
I really didn't think it was going to happen. And
I
then
didn't
it did.
really react. A lot of people didn't really react the first time. And it's kind of a trivial thing. I do wish there was a little bit more time in between where it cuts to after she passes to the funeral. Like I feel, movies got to movie a little bit, but at the same time, like we're kind of getting whiplash the same way that Shuri is. I just wish we had a little bit more time to like sit with it because the first time I didn't react.
Also, another message of the movie that it played into is like a mother's love. All these mostly internal conflicts kind of happen because of a mother's love, both with Namor, and then with it sparks the start of the conflict between Namor and the Wakandans. So yeah, I really did not see that coming. I literally just like I sat there in shock, and I was just like, great. Like now she's alone.
When she throws the line back at him, about a child who scoffs at tradition. And then he says, the world has taken too much from you for you to be a child anymore.
Yeah.
Something like that. And I was just like, oh. Oh my God. I think like that's when it hit a lot of people.
Actually, I liked what they did with M'Baku's character.
I love M'Baku. I think everybody does. There's something about his energy as a character, and then the way that Winston Duke plays that character and just looks like he's having so much fun all the time. Just like it see, I'm doing it now. It just like it radiates.
Yeah. I do like though he wasn't just like a comic like a comedic character. I liked how he was kind of the voice of reason.
Well, he's very important. And there's a TikToker I follow, Tyrell, who did an interview with him and Lupita, and they were talking about how this film is very much a feminist film, and I would agree. You have these incredible women, essentially leading this film,
right?
But one thing that they said is often overlooked is the male role in feminism, which I think M'Baku kind of embodies, the fact that he is very involved and he's doing his part and he's listening, but he's also giving counsel and he's, trying to cooperate in the best way possible and, kind of lifting them up. He's facilitating their empowerment, I would I would put it that way.
That's one of the characters that I feel like between the first movie and the second movie, he's had a lot of growth that wasn't even on screen. But I don't even care that it wasn't on screen. You can just kind of like tell.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah,
did like that a lot.
Yeah, there's plenty that happens off screen that we don't need. Like, we don't need the training montage. We don't need every little piece of dialogue.
But should we talk about Namor? I feel like we haven't talked about him all that much yet. And he is a main character. He's a lovely character.
He's an amazing character.
He's an amazing character. One of the things they definitely mentioned, even before the movie came out, that he was not going to be like a villain to the storyline. And I don't think I really appreciated that sentiment. Like, I was excited for it, but I don't think I really appreciated it until his very first like line in the movie, like his initial dialogue, where they really just, and it's really like a simple statement, but they depict that so well. And it's kind of one of those things where at some points in the movie, I wasn't actually sure who was the antagonist and who was the protagonist. Because I feel like those roles switched kind of easily, kind of fluidly between Namor and Shuri.
I agree to disagree a little bit. I do agree that his intentions don't. He's definitely not like a villain. I know Ryan Coogler has referred to him as an anti-hero, which I know will get a lot of people up on arms. That's the writer-director saying it, all right? That's what his intention for the character was, and I think he did a very good job at that. But I definitely don't see him as a villain because his motivations come from a very different place. They come from a place of traumatic experiences and defense, basically. I do have to disagree with you a little bit that he definitely felt like the antagonist for pretty well all of it, because when the Wakandans go at Talokan, the Talokan come back like way harder. Like,
honestly, I got some the reason why I say that is because I got some of Thanos idealistic views. Like, I thought they're kind of similar, because I know technically Thanos, as if you look at the definition and how it's written, was kind of a protagonist and the Avengers were like the antagonist. So that's how it kind of felt. Because I understood what he was saying, and some of his, like, I agreed with what some of his thoughts were, but he's definitely more of like an extremist point of view. And I don't agree with that. But then, there are certain aspects of what Shuri was saying that I also agreed with. And then there was a little bit of her actions, which I did not agree with. So, there's a lot of back and forth I felt between them that was like, like I wasn't sure which side I wanted to kind of come out on top. Because instinctively you want the Wakandans to like, come out on top. But then if you really kind of think about it, some people may lean more towards Namor. So I think the movie did a good job with like kind of keeping you mentally on your toes.
Yeah. It's also important to remember that Namor is like 500 years old. So he's seen it all. He's he's seen it all.
Well, he's 500 years old, but I'd also say isolationism has not been favorable to him and how he thinks, which is why I think he took such an extremist view.
There's also the question, though, especially because of how, his army fights, how powerful and how agile and strategic they are. How many encounters have they had? Like, they had to have, like, you don't get that from training in your aquatic basement, you know what I mean? Like, you get that from experience. Begs the question, did they somehow find themselves entangled in all of that? And that's why he is the way that he is, because he's literally been through every single one. Like, there were huge naval battles in the world wars, right?
Yeah, World War II specifically,
and with
the submarines.
So like there's plenty that's gone on.
I had also a similar thought within those lines of thinking. And I thought about it when they used their siren call to sort of, lure people to their death. That is not really, I don't believe, a Central American myth. That's more Greek. Sirens are from Greek mythology. And so I kind of thought you know, yes, it originates from Greek mythology, but also, you know, back in the day, sailors always reported sightings of like sirens and mermaids and, you know, things like that. So I kind of had a thought that maybe over the years, the sightings that these people had were just them. So that goes a little bit into what you were saying, you know, how much experience do they actually have with the upper world? Well, maybe they have a lot.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's a lot. Or it's hard not to root against them or root with them.
Oh yeah. I wish we saw a little bit more of
Saying this right.
his generals, Namora and Atuma.
I know, they're so cool. Also, I don't Atuma didn't actually like die, right? It was kind of ambiguous. I know Nomura didn't because they have that little chat at the end.
Oh, I didn't even think of that with Okoye because they
Yeah,
fought.
because they fought, but I don't think it was very clear whether or not she killed him or if she just defeated him in that particular fight.
Well, they don't really die, remember? Because on the bridge scene where we thought Okoye had like stabbed and slashed all those other people, and then they just kind of got back up. But yeah, I
So
didn't
is
even think of
Nakia the
that.
only one who had the right weapons to do that?
Mm,
Because remember, Nakia killed two of them, and that's what started, the war against.
yeah, I did not agree with her for doing that, but I understand. But whatever.
I was a different person. Are you sure?
Yeah.
I'm kidding. I love Nakia.
Yeah, but definitely wanted more of Namora because I feel like she challenges Namor verbally a lot to be like a good leader. Because we see that at the very end of the movie where she's like, you like, oh, like you made an alliance, blah blah blah, whatever. So I feel like we could have seen that a little bit more.
Yeah,
Because then I feel
yeah.
like
The
I was already interested in her character, but that would have made me even more interested. Like, and in terms of also their kind of relationship that they have.
Yeah, that kind of brings me to like an overall gripe with that last like 15 minutes or so. Amazing fight or fights, I should say, like plural. It it did kind of like it struck me. It struck a lot of people. And I get that like sometimes in war that's literally how it is. But the fact that it just kind of turned and we had this kind of like kumbaya moment with Shuri and Namor and then you know him retreating back to Talokan and then it just kind of moves on.
Mm-hmm.
Like I would have liked maybe a beat or two in between that. I also would have liked a little bit longer of a beat with Ramonda on the ancestral plane.
Mm-hmm.
Like I feel like there was something missing there because she kind of just appears. And I get that there's a lot of significance with what she says to Shuri and the fact that it is her of all people.
Mm-hmm.
I just wish that it lasted a little bit longer again because everything else in this movie really kind of draws out. I really appreciate this kind of being a final step in grief, which is just acceptance
Right.
and being able to move on.
I really think the fight was kind of between like Namor and just kind of like the head royals of Wakanda. So maybe like Ramonda and Shuri. And then because they're kind of the leaders of their nations, they kind of got their whole army like swept up in it. So, you know, I don't think like obviously it was kind of a battle, it was a little bit like a war, but in terms of like an entirety of a nation being against the other, I don't really think that's what the point of it was supposed to be, if that makes any sense.
I'm a little lost, but I also think this is where we differ when you say that the Talokan don't necessarily feel like antagonists because I definitely think that they do. And again, with them just going full throttle, full
Yeah.
throttle at every given moment.
I mean,
Um,
Wakanda would have lost if they had not, you know, found a truce. Wakanda would have lost.
yeah,
So,
yeah, and that's sort of what I'm alluding to a little bit
I
because
mean, it's about their pain, honestly. That's like when I say it's not really about one nation going against the other. It's about two people's individual pain and how they kind of work through that by like going against each other, and they kind of realize that,
yeah, like why are we fighting?
yeah. I will
Why are
say
we
the way
fighting?
that
We
they,
are two of the most powerful nations in the entire world. Why are we fighting each other?
yeah.
Because we're gonna blow each other up before we even start to burn the rest of the world, you know?
Mhm. I will
And
say though, I feel like Shuri's turn of view and even Namor's turn of view was very abrupt. So I do get what you mean by just like adding a little something there to kind of
yeah.
make that make sense.
But I think there's also like a mutual respect between the two of them. The fact that she yielded, and he does acknowledge how powerful she is, especially as the Black Panther.
Yeah. And I feel like maybe that extra thing would have been like, you and I also talked about this, but what the actual villain of the movie would have been, which is the world governments, essentially. So if you had added that extra step in, because they put hints at the beginning, the whole world putting pressure on Wakanda and also vibranium, which both Talokan and Wakanda have and need. If there was that extra enemy where Namor and Shuri kind of team up to defeat that, and that's how you get that ceasefire, I think maybe would have been a-okay.
Yeah, I was definitely expecting like a bait and switch.
Mhm.
Like I was ready for them become enemies and then make an alliance because they have a common enemy. Because the enemy of my enemy is my friend, right? So was definitely expecting that. And I kind of didn't get that, which also made me wish that Val wasn't there at all because I fucking
I
hate her
can't
anyway.
stand her
I hate
at
her anyway.
all.
You know, the
Yeah.
character, not
Not Julie
um
Louise Dreyfus.
Julie Louis Dreyfus.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, she's amazing. And she does such a great job of making you hate her, which I think is what you're supposed to do. You have all these other projects and there's this whole interconnectivity, like where you kind of forced to shoe that in a little bit, shoehorn
Mhm.
it in, because it kind of feels that way. And again, it doesn't pull it out from me, because to be honest, I was watching it the second time and I kind of ignored it.
They're definitely putting in some more Thunderbolts hints. And even though I feel like this was a weird movie to kind of put it in,
Yeah. Like it was fine to throw Ross in there for a couple scenes as like a cameo, or to
yeah.
have him, sit in a different role. But I think it just took away some of the focus again because there's so much already going on.
There are a lot of characters in this movie.
And there's a lot of characters and there's a
Yeah.
lot of and they're all developed very well. So
Mhm.
you know,
But yeah, but it does put major implications for Thunderbolts. Val is kind of the Nick Fury character of that. She's the head of the CIA, which means that the Thunderbolts are mostly probably going to be under like government contract. So my theory is that it's also going to pertain to vibranium and probably stealing some information or some vibranium, some sort of source. Because you have super soldiers and then a character that can phase through any matter pretty much with Ghost. So it definitely sets that up. It sets up the governments being pieces of shits pretty much. And that's going to be like a major conflict in the future, I think. I don't know. I wish they kind of concluded that a little bit in this movie and then kind of picked up like later in the future. Yeah, that's one thing I do notice that like they'll open up like a subplot in a movie, but then they'll finish it in like 3 movies later, which kind of annoys me.
yeah.
But
Well, it annoys a lot of people. That's why some people have just like stopped completely.
I wish there was a bit more conclusion. I feel like if you open up a subplot in a movie or a show, conclude it, but then have just enough where like you can pick it up later.
Yeah.
But you mentioned the vibranium detector, and that means that we have to talk about our new introduced
Miss
character,
Williams,
Miss
yes.
Miss Riri
Riri
Williams.
Williams.
I'm actually even more excited to watch Ironheart now that we see like kind of what her character is in this movie.
Yeah. Yeah, the fact that we get to see what she's like, she's a lot of fun. And again, my theater reacted very well.
So did mine.
My theater reacted very well to her. And I think the fact that she is so relatable and she just has so much energy,
Mhm.
really gets a lot of people going.
Right. She's very real.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's what it was.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people, would react more to her than they would to like Shuri.
I will be really interested to see how she kind of, I guess, makes her muck too. Ironheart suit. I guess it's a Mach 3 because she already made a Mach 2. I don't know, but that's in Wakanda still. She can't bring it back. And I have to say,
And
even
it
though
could
I
be.
am tired of having a lot of Stark reminders, I'm still excited for the show.
Yeah.
And her own journey.
Well, I know her relationship to Tony Stark is different in the comics. I like how they didn't really touch on that in this.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope that they dial it down for her own show. I kind of get the vibe that she is more fascinated by his work
Mm-hmm.
less than him.
Right.
Because like Peter Parker is just like Mr. Stark, Mr. Stark, oh my god, Mr. Stark. Whereas I feel Riri Williams is like, Iron Man suit, that's really cool. I want to build one too. I'm really smart. I like to build things. I like cars and machinery and electronics, and I'm just like super smart. Like I can do that too.
But I was honestly very impressed with Riri's character introduction. Because sometimes in like these big movies where you have so many characters and all these plot points, new characters who you're kind of introducing for the first time can be put on like the back burner, and they can be a little like two-dimensional, not really be like fleshed out. But I didn't feel that way with Riri. I feel like she was a really good character, and I think they did a really good job introducing her and getting people excited for her series and that story that will be told.
And I know a lot of people kind of compare it to America Chavez with Multiverse of Madness because they have similar kind of introductions as like a MacGuffin.
Mm-hmm.
But I definitely think, in benefit of the doubt, America Chavez is like 14, 15. So
Yeah.
she's a good bit younger,
Mm-hmm.
whereas Riri's in college, and that's really where you kind of start to really find your personality and you really start to grow into your own skin.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, you do get a better sense of her personality and of her character. And I think the fact that she just has so much energy. She has so much energy, and the way that she was written, she really gets to show that.
Mm-hmm.
Even though she doesn't necessarily take up a whole lot of screen time. I guess throw this in the beginning somewhere when I'm talking about that. I just want to point out that I think it's so cool that, Ryan Coogler, this is his fourth like major project as of, right now. So the fact that he's relatively new to the scene and is the first Black writer and director to have a $1 billion film, I just think is so cool.
Okay, so now with the mid-credit scene. Spoilers, by the way, plug your ears if you ignored the first spoiler warning. T'Challa has a son, which I'm not really sure how I feel about it. One, for Nakia, I'm like, you just left your son to go and almost die. Like, what if you passed away during this mission? Now your
I think
son.
she knew she wasn't going to.
Well,
I
not
think she has enough
necessarily.
faith in. I feel she has enough faith in her own skills.
I don't
But
know. She's
there's
kind of.
also the tradition of preparing your children. So I also have the feeling that she's been with him for 6 years. She's probably already prepared him for that, since T'Challa only had, you would assume, a couple of months.
Mm-hmm. I don't know.
So
Still, I'm kind of like, you just left your child
I'm able to
alone.
accept it. That's not a gripe for me.
It's not a gripe either, but it's just literally, it was like a thought that popped in my head. I'm like, you left him alone. But I appreciate the fact that it's kind of like it continues T'Challa's legacy, but also in a way it kind of, I feel like, took me out of all that Shuri had like accomplished. Because for a second I thought Shuri was kind of going to be his legacy, and then after that mid-credit scene, all I could really think about was that T'Challa had a son. I'm just
Well,
interested on your thoughts on that.
I haven't been able to like sit with it because I've been kind of processing everything else. um, so I haven't really thought about it too much. Um, I wasn't immediately pulled out of it. I know some people were. Some of the people I went with were. I think the fact that they are 20 years apart. There's a couple of things here. They're 20 years apart because she's supposed to be around 26, 27, right? She's our age. But there's also the fact that it's not very clear whether or not she actually took the throne.
She
So she
didn't.
took up the mantle of Black Panther
Yeah.
for sure. Like that's like non-negotiable. She is the Black Panther.
Mhm.
But M'Baku is challenging for the throne, and there's this idea up in the air that she might not necessarily want to be the leader of Wakanda in the sense that she is queen.
That did make me think that like if
It could go very Lion King in the future.
this movie did have a very Lion King vibe to it, to be honest, but it made me think that if T'Challa Jr. wants the throne, I feel like it'll be a kind of a similar aspect when Killmonger tried to take it, whereas he won't be really viewed as kind of like a true Wakandan because he wasn't born or raised there. And I just feel like that I can see that being a conflict in the future if that's the road that they decide to take.
Should be interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. It took me like I thought it was cute, and I was like, oh, like T'Challa lives on, but it did take me a little bit out of it where I was like, I just kind of felt like it diminished Shuri's story just like a little bit, or part of her story anyway. Maybe not the entirety of it. I don't know.
Because he also mostly goes by his Haitian name, which again, side note, the fact that there's a lot of Haitian appreciation is awesome, and I love that.
All Saints. That's what it translates to.
oh, Tucson.
Yeah, All Saints. So he's like,
actually, that's interesting to think about, considering just the idea of the ancestral plane. That's I didn't think about that. I didn't know that. Didn't think about that. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Everything is intentional and it's done so well. Yeah, I don't know how to feel about it yet, but
I'm very 50-50 at the moment. Like I'm like, do I like it? Do I not like it? I don't know.
Yeah, I think it might be setting stuff up in like the far future. I don't think it's going to be something where it's like Young Avengers. Like he's way too young.
Yeah, that's kind of all I had to discuss with you today. Is there anything else you wanted to quickly mention? Well, guys, that was our discussion on Black Panther Wakanda Forever. Connor, as always, thank you for joining me. Always fun to talk Star Wars and Marvel and anything else really with you. Well, guys, leave a like on the video. Comment, how did you feel about this movie? Did you like it? Did you not? I know it's a very mixed response to it right now, but
keep it respectful in the comments.
And be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future Marvel reaction videos as well as Marvel movie reviews. But guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.